So good morning, everyone. Good morning. We can do better than this. Come on. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you. So my name is Thomas Maurer. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my first time in Sweden. Many people already said you're from Switzerland, so it's the same thing anyway, but I'll talk a bit about that later. I work as a lead architect at a company called ITnetics, Microsoft MVP. I did some stuff in Hyper-V a long time ago, well, still do sometimes. And now I'm focusing mostly on Azure and Azure Stack, and Jonas invited me here to speak a little bit about that. So what I'm going to talk about today is Azure Stack, right? And I try to focus a little bit on, I know that not everyone in the room is familiar with Azure and Azure Stack, so I will try to explain a little bit of it. It's not an Azure Stack overview, but I try to set the ground here. And then I will talk a little bit about Azure Stack operations. That's the main idea, right? I will talk a bit about what do you need to do to operate Azure Stack, and what do you, how do you monitor it? So I still have a little bit of SCOM in there, promise. And I also have some other stuff in there as well, right? Does that sound good? Yeah. Perfect, okay. So when Jonas asked me here if I want to come here, it was a little bit of a weird situation. I didn't know if I should say yes. We had some bad experience this year. So this one was when I was still happy, right? And then we had this one coming as well. But at the end I thought, yeah, it cannot be that bad, right? We're on the same side. It also happens, I think, to you, you should be known that, again, I mentioned it before, Switzerland and Sweden could be the same thing, right? So especially when I go to the US, it's also very funny. I go to the US and say, okay, where are you from? I say, I'm from Switzerland. And they say, oh, great, that's a nice country. I always wanted to go to Sweden. I was like, okay, yeah. So, yeah, it even works at Wall Street. So I try to put something in my presentation just for the beginning to make sure that everyone understands the difference between Sweden and Switzerland, right? So let's first start with the women. So this is a typical woman in Sweden, and this is a typical woman in Switzerland. You can see completely different, right? Then you have Queue Poulard. I hope I did type it right? We have something in Switzerland which is totally different. It's called Hakt, actually. Completely different thing. And then we have politicians like yours and ours. You can see completely different type, right? But it goes on. So my last favorite, well, almost the last thing. So this is the biggest furniture store in Sweden, right? This is the biggest in Switzerland. And then the last thing, that's very proud to speak about this. We have your king, obviously, and then we have our king. So you can see completely different countries. Okay, so let's switch to technology. That's what I'm here for. So Azure Stack, and I want to set the ground idea of Azure Stack, because when I talk to people often it's not really clear what it is, and I just want to go for what it is and why you would actually buy or use an Azure Stack. So Azure Stack is basically extending the Azure cloud platform to your on-premise environment or wherever you need Azure services, right? It's not there to design to just replace your virtualization environment. Therefore, you have Hyper-V, System Center, probably other vendors as well. But it's really the idea to bring the cloud closer to you, right? If you watch the latest Microsoft presentations, we're always talking about the intelligent cloud and the intelligent edge and things like that. The intelligent edge meaning extending the cloud basically to your wherever you need Azure Stack. And gives you the flexibility and control of that. So what does that mean? It brings a consistent platform, an Azure consistent platform to your data center. It's not something different. It should be a consistent platform. And that means the tooling is going to be the same, right? You have the same portal experience. You have the same application model. If you're dealing with Azure, you're familiar with the Azure Resource Manager, with the Azure Resource Manager templates to deploy and automate things. You're used to different Azure services, not just virtual machines, right? There are also other functions, serverless, app services, PaaS service, SQL as a service, and I could go on for days maybe. And then you have a cloud platform which is basically running the whole stuff. And this has some advantages. So obviously, if you're used to the same tools, if you're used to the Azure portal, you're also immediately familiar with the Azure Stack portal. If you're used to the Azure PowerShell or Azure CLI, or you're using Visual Studio, you can connect and interact with Azure Stack in the same way, right? It's also that you can use, like, if you build automation, you can run the same automation, the same scripts, the same ARM templates, again, against Azure and against Azure Stack as well. So it's the same platform, and that's the whole idea. And it brings you all the, or not all the stuff, but it brings you a lot of stuff which are Azure services. I mentioned, for example, app services, functions, obviously infrastructure service from Azure to your data center, right? And then you have a platform, I will talk a little bit about that, which is an integrated system, so it's all pre-designed more or less for you. You just put it in kind of like as an appliance. So, and it's also a very good time. It's something which makes Microsoft really unique, right? So when they had their earning calls, their quarterly earning calls, one of the biggest mention in there was the positioning of Azure and Azure Stack, and that Microsoft is basically the only vendor out there who can deliver this hybrid cloud strategy, right? There's no vendor which can basically do really both, except for Microsoft, right? Not saying this is a good or a bad thing, but just, there is just, like if you go to some other cloud vendors, they tell you everything should go to cloud, right? If you go to another vendor, he says, cloud, that's a bad thing. Let's do everything on premise. With Microsoft, what their idea is really give you the choice and flexibility to move stuff and do whatever you need for your workload. You can mix it up, or you can just stay on premise or go to the cloud, whatever you like. So I talked about Azure Consistency, but what does it really mean, right? So I put some pictures in there. First of all, this is the Azure portal. I hope everyone in the room has seen it before. When not, just try it out today, directly after my session. No, just kidding. But this is the Azure portal, right? And this is the Azure Stack portal. Well, I did a very horrible job taking those screenshots, so they didn't look the same, but you can see it's actually the same experience, the same portal, right? The same UI. If you know how to do something in Azure, you also know how to do something in Azure Stack, right? So that's the whole point of it. And this is just the UI. The UI is one thing, but also using the same APIs and the same platform and the same tooling, that's the other thing. So this is an Azure data center, obviously. You can, like, when you think of it, as a huge place. I'm not sure if someone in the room had the chance to visit one of those data centers. Is there someone? Okay. Me neither, unfortunately. But there are tours, so if ever you can go, because the things I heard from people who went there, it's really impressive how large those things are. I think we all have seen data centers, right? But this is like another category of data centers. So the challenge Microsoft really has now with Azure Stack is bring that down. Not everyone can build a data center like this and put Azure in his data center, right? When you're on premise, you have very small shops. You have locations where you basically have like probably 10 to 20 employees maybe or something like that. And you still want to run your services in there. So Azure Stack looks like this. It comes as an integrated system, and I mentioned that multiple times already. So it looks like this. There are like 3 vendors on these pictures. There are more. I will talk a little bit about that later. But basically, this is an Azure Stack, right? Each of those are an Azure Stack. And you can see that you have servers in there, like standard servers. You can see there are switches in there. And basically, that's it, right? Those hosts, those servers, they're basically sealed. All of it is pre-installed and pre-configured, and you don't even have access to it. Like they are running Windows Server 2016 in the background, but to be honest, it doesn't matter because you don't have access to that Hyper-V host or whatever it's running. Right? Think about it as a storage appliance or something like that. It's sealed, you don't have access. You will have access to a web portal, like an admin portal and a customer portal, and I will talk and show you that a little bit later in the talk. But you don't go there and like go and update like the drivers like by yourself or figure out which network card should I buy or whatever. It's just really you go and say, I want to buy Azure Stack, and then they ask you, what size do you want? And then they give you one, and that's basically it. That's the idea how it works, right? And again, I will talk a little bit about that. That gives you the chance to also put an Azure Stack in a car like this, right? If you have seen some of the Ignite presentation, this is one of their Microsoft Azure cars, it has a lot of IoT sensors and stuff like that, and it also has a Azure Stack in the back, right? So you can bring Azure services wherever you go. To be honest, I have no idea when you need that, but it's a cool thing, right? It shows the proposal. So you can, well, there are some customers which need that. Think about like there were some defense companies and things like that. They were highly interested in solutions like this. Okay, so what are the use cases for Azure Stack? So the first one I call the technology use case, or the edge and disconnected solution. So wherever you want to use an Azure Stack, and you don't have like really good internet connectivity, you have sometimes internet connectivity, or you don't have internet connectivity at all to the public cloud. So how are you going to use Azure, right? Think about a cruise ship company. This is like my favorite one because Microsoft brings it in their examples. But actually, I have a customer, a cruise ship company, where I talk to them like what they can do, right? So the idea is they run a ton of software in there. They run a ton of servers for the entertainment systems, for everything, which is basically it's a small city, right? And they have, like, when you're on sea, they don't have like very good or very expensive internet connectivity, so they cannot run stuff in the cloud. So they need to run something on their ships, right? And that's the idea of it. That's one scenario where you can bring Azure Stack closer to you. And also applications which cannot deal with a lot of latency, right? I know here in Sweden, the internet connectivity is usually pretty good, but there are other countries where the connectivity, like other countries, I mean like Germany and things like that, where the connectivity is not that good, right? Another thing, and that's the main case for Switzerland, we'll see how that will change with the new Azure data centers coming to Switzerland. But one thing is regulations and internal policies and things like that, where you're not allowed to store data outside of your country, or not at a third party, or it just needs to stay inside your premises, right? And so Azure Stack allows you to bring the same services to your location. There's no sync of your customer data or your data to Azure, but you can run and save them there. It's also very interesting. In Switzerland, we have those health data who need to stay and resist in Switzerland. So they can combine it. So IoT sensors go to Azure, but all the customer health data stays in Switzerland on Azure Stack, and we combine those data sets. And the third one is basically, and also an interesting one. I was always thinking, that's not a big case, but there are a lot of companies who want to start with cloud, right? They want to go there, but they're not ready yet for public cloud. So they want to start in their premises with their rules, their way of managing it, and Azure Stack allows them to do that, right? So they're going to get familiar with Azure Stack in a certain way. So those are the use cases. And by the way, is anyone running an Azure Stack in here? No one. Okay, that's good. Hopefully, you will all run Azure Stack after that session. Who runs Azure, by the way? Who is working with Azure? Okay. Okay, that's first of all, took a little while, but there were a lot of hands. Okay. So what is the delivery? I told you that this comes as an appliance, right? As an appliance solution. And I want to quote here, I think everyone knows that guy, right? This is Jeffrey Snover, technical fellow at Microsoft, and inventor of PowerShell. So he says, and I quote him here because I think that's very true, Azure Stack is for people that want to use a cloud, not for people who want to build one, right? That's the thing. Like, we spend hours and days and maybe weeks and months and maybe even years on building clouds on premises, right? It took, like everyone probably knows, if you do a cloud project where you start to build something like this, it takes forever. With Azure Stack, you just buy it. It's pre-configured. It's pre-designed. You just put it in your data center, which also takes a couple of days, but then you're basically done. After 5 days, you can run your first workloads of Azure Stack in your data center. At least 5 days, max 5 days. So this is what it means. First, we have an integrated system. So we have the different hardware vendors. You can see there are a couple more than I just showed you. Fujitsu was just announced. So you go basically to them, and you tell them you want Azure Stack, and then they will make you an offering. You always go to one of the hardware vendors. You don't buy it directly from Microsoft. You buy it from one of the hardware vendors of your choice. And then it's very fast to deploy. Since you tell them how should the name be, how is like your your URL you want to use, the internal networks you want to use for your Azure Stack. They do the pre-configuration of the switches and everything. And then they come to your data center. On day one, basically one guy comes in, puts the rack in, or puts the stuff into the rack if you have an existing one. On day two, one guy comes in and basically runs the installer. And then that takes around 18 hours maybe. And then on day three, you basically do some checks and see if everything is running. And day 4 and 5 for testing and reserve days if something goes wrong. So you're very fast in like spinning up a cloud, and you can immediately start deploying your experience. The other thing is the cloud model. So I'm not going too deep in all that stuff, right? We don't have time for that. But the other thing is how you pay for it. So usually you pay what most scenarios you did, like with Windows Server, you licensed Windows Server as kind of like how many physical cores did you have, right? With Windows Server 2016, the cores. But Azure is a little bit different. So there is this pay-per-use model where you basically only pay services when they're running, right? So Microsoft, like you're in a connected scenario. So if you start up a virtual machine, you start to pay licensing for that. If you shut it down or remove it, you don't pay any licensing at all to Microsoft anymore, right? So it's also a pay-per-use model. There's also a capacity model if you don't like that usage metering. It will be more expensive though, because you have to license everything, like the complete physical hardware. Even if you don't run anything on it, you still pay. If you use the pay-per-use, if you shut down everything, the only thing you need to pay is the hardware, right? But nothing for the software. And a very important thing is, since it's an integrated system, all the support is running over Microsoft and the OEM. And the very important thing here is that whoever you call, they are connected between each other. So if you have a problem with your system and you call them, if you call Microsoft and they tell you it's a hardware issue, they don't just hang up and say call HP or Dell or whatever. They say, okay, let's open a ticket, and then they will directly connect the support engineers from that OEM, right? So they work together to solve the issue. And that's really how the support experience, we're operating 2 Azure Stacks right now for our customers. And that's how really the support experience is really fantastic. Good, so how does that look like? How does an Azure Stack look like? You saw the picture of it. This is kind of like a diagram version. This is the smallest Azure Stack configuration you can get. And everything in between the dotted line, that's basically the Azure Stack. So you will have 4 servers, which are basically like Windows Server 2016 with storage spaces direct in the background. It's a hyper-converged infrastructure. You have a BMC switch, and today you have 2 leaf or Tor switches, which are also part of the Azure Stack. And then you have something called the hardware lifecycle host. So the hardware lifecycle host basically is it's an additional management host from the OEM. When you like run HPE, it's probably one view installed to do some stuff. If it's Dell, there's some other software on it. So that's something like that. And then the only thing you need to do basically is connect some stuff like power and network, and then you put it to your network and you can access it, right? Sounds very simple. There's some more work to that. So this is all pre-designed. You cannot basically go to HP and tell them what server they want to use. They offer you what they can put in Azure Stack. I can just talk about HP because I know them, like the server names. Obviously, the other vendors have that too. But so they have just a standard DL380 with disks, and then you can choose basically how big the disks are and how much memory you want in there and the CPU, and that's it. You cannot choose which network adapters you want in there. They're all pre-configured, pre-designed. They also take care of which firmware they are running. Everything is really pre-designed. So again, the architecture done by Microsoft and the OEMs. They have this reference design. The OEM has to use that and build it exactly that way. They have to do the testing and the validation on that thing, so they cannot just put something in. Every update gets tested on all the different hardwares out there. Microsoft spent, I think, a couple of $100 million or something like that. I cannot remember. I wrote it down in the talk on hardware. So they just buy the hardware and start testing on it when they ship an update, right? They have to make sure that the updates really are done perfectly and work on those systems. So they really do the validation. The deployment is completely automated, again. There is an internal monitoring. So Azure Stack is basically has I call it the health resource provider, which basically does checks of all the systems internally. So you don't have to deploy an agent on your systems, on the physical boxes. Well, first of all, you can't because you don't have access. And secondly, you basically don't need to because there's already a service monitoring that. And then, I don't go through everything, but the other thing is I mentioned updating. So if you want to update that, like your whole cloud, your infrastructure, there are also some virtual servers which run the portal and stuff like that. You don't have to take care of this, right? If you run a cloud today built by your own, you have to think, okay, what do I need to update first? Do I first need to patch that host, then I have to wait to the next one, then patch this VM, then roll up on that System Center component, roll up on that one, and so on. You don't have to think about this here. Think about updating an iPhone or an Android phone, right? When there are updates for Android phones, but that's a different story. So you just press, like you see a new update, you press OK, and Azure Stack will take care of it, right? It will do all the thinking for you, which server needs to patch first, and so on. All that is done automated. And then they put a ton of security and compliance in there. They use all those, if you have a look at Windows Server 2016 and also now Windows Server 2019, there's a ton of security stuff in there to like lock down basically the infrastructure. And also like PowerShell, just-in-time and just-enough administration, device and credential guard and things like this. So that's impressive. So they put all of that in there so you don't have to take care of it, right? You still have to take care of it in your VMs and your stuff you deploy, but on the infrastructure side, this is done for you, right? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Azure Stack operation and integration. So start with the integration parts. I will quickly go through that. So first of all, you need to choose this is all preparing stuff, right? Preparing stuff until it's deployed. So you first of all need to decide how is the licensing going to look like? How do I license Azure Stack, the pay-per-use model or the capacity model? Is my Azure Stack going to connect it to Azure? Like do I reporting to Azure or not? Is it completely disconnected? Which identity provider do I use? Like, is it connected to Azure Active Directory or ADFS? That are the two options. And then you obviously have to check certificates. If you're running it externally, you will need external certificates, right? If it's public available. If it's internally, your certificate has to be like made internally, and so on. And then you need to provide space, power, and cooling. And this is the funny part. This sounds very simple, but in a lot of Azure Stack deployments out there, one of those things are a problem, right? So customers think, okay, I put that in a branch office somewhere, and then they realize, first of all, I do not have enough power, or I don't have the cooling for it, and then the whole thing crashes, right? So it sounds simple, but it is important. The other thing, which a lot of things fail, is the network integration. So everything in that gray box is Azure Stack, but you have to connect it to those boarded devices using BGP or static routing. And it turns out that a lot of networking people have no clue about this. Is there some networking people in there? Network engineers? You can raise your hand, it's fine. Yeah. No, but it turns out that this sometimes is a problem, right? And this is where everything gets connected, and this is where, at the end, if Azure Stack is in your data center, you connect it, if it doesn't work, 99.99%, it's like a network issue. Like it's always the network, right? So, and then you also have to integrate in the monitoring. The chances are very high that you already have a monitoring solution out there. I think most of you doing that, otherwise I would not be here at SCOM-Day. But internally, Azure Stack is monitored, but think like somehow you want to be alerted, right? You want to have it probably in your ticketing system and so on, and you need to integrate that as well. Okay, so let's talk operations. If you think about Azure, we are basically all customers of Azure, right? And Microsoft engineers are operating and running Azure and making sure that everything is working. If you have a look at Azure Stack, Microsoft is not operating our Azure Stack, right? It's not that that they take care of it. They put it in there, they pre-designed everything, but we are in charge as customer to do that. So we need also to do the operations part, which is done in Azure by Microsoft, right? That's very important to understand. And this is also where you then have two portals. For example, as a symbolic view, you have the tenant portal, which looks like the Azure portal for the customers, where you deploy VMs, where you do services and things like that. And then you have the admin portal, which from a design looks exactly the same, but this is where basically you do the administration. So for example, if something breaks, you see it in there. You see like when you need to add a node to the system, when you need to add more capacity to that, when you want to see that you want to build a new subscription for a customer, then you do that in the admin portal, right? So the operator still has some responsibilities, right? We need to think about sizing and capacity management, the network integration, the monitoring. We have to like create the offerings, subscriptions, to manage the marketplace. Like let's say what can actually people deploy on our Azure Stack. So we need to make sure that the services are there and so on. And then we have taking care of patch and update, maintenance task. If something fails, we have to check with the OEM that he sends a new disk or automatically sends a new disk, but someone needs to go to the data center and replace it. If there is an incident, someone needs to open a ticket. You have to make sure that the backup is done, like check that the backup is done right. And then you also have to probably sometimes change certificates, right? Don't forget that. This is sort of things basically the operator still needs to do. There are vendors out there and companies out there who give that to you as a managed service, but if you buy an Azure Stack and you want to operate it, this is still stuff you need to do in the background. And, oh sorry, someone want to take a picture of this? I saw, okay, good. So this here basically should show a little bit the old style stuff, right? We don't have access anymore like the system administrator did to the Hyper-V management and things like that. We do not have, like, we don't use those tools on that platform anymore. We can't. Again, closed system, right? So what we have is basically the admin portal. And I'm going to show you a little bit in a quick walkthrough, a little bit of the admin portal. So you're going to see the fastest running Azure portal ever. When you log in to the Azure Stack admin portal, it looks like this. And you can see the difference here basically being that administrator symbol here. Otherwise, from a design point, it looks the same. You also have some stuff you don't have as a customer usually. You can manage the user subscriptions, the offerings, the marketplace, the region, and so on. You can also see the update tile here to basically install updates of Azure Stack. And this is really just for the admin and operator experience. So if you go to region management, what you can see, you get an overview. You can see that you have like all the components are healthy right now. You can see that there is an update available in that region. If thinking about region, in the future, we will be able to have like multiple sites, right? So you can put one Azure Stack region, like let's say in Göteborg and the other one in Stockholm. And then you have two regions like what Azure would have, right? Today, it's only one region, up to 16 hosts. That's basically the max size you can have today for one Azure Stack, and then you will have another instance. Good, so since there are no alerts, it does not make sense to go to alerts, but basically what you will see is some information about those stuff. These are the resource providers. You can see that compute is good, network is good, storage is good. You can go to the update tile. Here you can see that one update is available. You can see it's a hot fix. You can get some more information if you click on that link here. And then you can basically, what you can do here is just update now. And then it will take a while and update the Azure Stack. Everything will stay available. All the customer workloads will stay available. However, it's still recommended to do it like during a maintenance window, right? There are some scenarios where all the time something can go wrong. Obviously, the update process always checks, like for every host, for every server, it patches. It checks if it's healthy. It does a base set of checks. If everything works, it goes to the next step. If it does not, it will like say, okay, update failed. We pause it here at this point, fix it first, fix the issue first, and then you can go on and resume the update. You can also manage capacity. So you see like this, how much you have left, how many terabytes of storage you have, how many public IPs you have. You can also see like how much RAM you have left, and so on. If we go to infrastructure, this is where all the stuff behind the infrastructure. This is all the stuff which we also do get out from the monitoring API, right? So you can see that there is, for example, some compute controller, which is healthy. To be honest, we don't really have to care what those things are, right? We care when something breaks, then we have to tell the support, basically, compute controller shows error or something, and then they will help us with that. There's not much we can do about it, right? There's not much, because we cannot access the compute controller in any way. And then we have the possibility to see such a scale unit. Scale unit meaning that one rack I just showed you before a couple of times. If you click on that one, you can see that there are a couple of nodes. In that case, there are 8 nodes in it. And you can also click on a node, and then you can see some more information about the node. You can also drain the node, or you can basically just say repair. Repair is just basically reinstall it automatically. Right. So that's basically the portal terms of administration of the hardware. There's another thing, which is like the marketplace management, which I want to quickly show you. I told you that not all services are available. By default, you don't have anything in the tenant portal to deploy, right? Because it's your part to actually do that. And to making that easier, you can build your custom marketplace item. So if you have your own server image, you can put it in. But it's easy to add stuff from Azure as well. So if you go to the marketplace management here, you can see what all the stuff which you already put into the marketplace for your customers or tenants which are using your Azure Stack. And then you can click Add from Azure, and you will get that whole list of marketplace items which are in Microsoft Azure available, right? It's not everything, so it's not all the thousands of marketplace items Azure offers today, but it's a couple of hundreds which are compatible with Azure Stack, right? So for example, if you want to have an image with SQL pre-installed, the only thing you need to do is click here. It will tell you, okay, this image here, what it includes, and then you just press the download button, and it will download it and put it into your marketplace. And your customers or your tenants can use it and deploy it, right? There's also a description how licensing works for each of them. And there's also, right now the screenshot is a little bit, it looks very Microsoft-y, but to be honest, there are like also things like obviously Linux servers, Ubuntu, and so on in there, as well as network appliances like Barracuda, Checkpoint, and so on. So if you need that stuff, there's also pre-configured for that. Good. And then there are some more admin tools. So I told you, you don't only have the portal, right? The portal experience is fine, it's good, but you also have an API for that. And you have tools to administrate Azure Stack as well. So one thing is the Azure Stack PowerShell module. So you have a PowerShell module, which basically gives you a whole set of commands, and basically I think you can do almost everything or even more than you can do in the UI as usual. Like you can figure like when you had to add a new node, you can, for example, completely automate that process. If you want to get alerts out or the capacity, you want to get the capacity information using that module, you can do that as well. So this is the official PowerShell module, right? Then what you will be familiar if you're an Azure Stack operator is the Azure Stack Privileged Endpoint. Or sometimes we call it the PEP. This is basically, if things go south, then you have to log in kind of like an emergency console, right? This is basically the kind of like emergency console. This is really where you log in. We're using PowerShell just enough administration. So you log in to that system, and then you have a set of commands. And you can see if I did the normal get command, and I only have a couple of PowerShell commands available by default to basically do stuff, right? To basically check some stuff and testing some stuff. If things really break, I cannot access the portal anymore or something goes really wrong, I call support. They will ask me to open one of these sessions, and then there's a PowerShell commandlet called session token. I will get a token, they send it to support, they give me a token back, and then I'm able to kind of like break glass, and then have the full command set available. And then we can, with support together, we can basically then run the normal clustering commands or the Hyper-V commands to basically manage the whole stack, right? But this is literally a breaking glass scenario, and you can only do that together with Microsoft or OEM support So this is really a closed thing. And then you only can like fix the problem. Like for example, everything is crashed for some reason. You have to start it up again. You can do that using that method. Okay, then there's also some like test Azure Stack stuff. I'm not going deep in that. So what about monitoring? I told you that Azure Stack monitors itself. And there are two things to it. So there's this Azure Stack Integrated Health Monitoring, or the Health Resource Provider, which is the Microsoft software part, which checks like when you saw the resource provider and everything was green and healthy. That was basically that. Why is this pressing? Okay. So this is basically that API, and you can use the REST API to access it from any kind of like tool. And then there are some hardware or OEM monitoring tools for the switches and stuff like that. That's not integrated yet in the Azure Stack experience. This is still done by the OEM, right? Because every OEM has different kind of like access to it, has different kind of hardware, and it's very hard to also tell them, okay, everyone has to use exactly the same vendor switch. That's not possible, right? So there are basically two things you have to monitor. And you can do that using a centralized monitoring tool like SCOM or something else. Obviously, we're going to use SCOM. And then you can add like multiple Azure Stacks, and then you can obviously integrate that with your existing tools. There is a SCOM management pack for Azure Stack, which also regularly gets updated with new stuff which is coming. So you can basically manage the Azure Stack operator part directly from SCOM. There is obviously also an Azure. I think there are some like SCOM management packs for Azure stuff, right? Which is then more for the tenant part. So just know that the Azure Stack management pack is more for the operator part. So also we have a quick demo here. This is from a video I stole from the friends in Seattle, just to show you quickly how that looks like. So in that deployment here, they basically have 4 Azure Stacks added, and you can see that's the name of the API where we go for, and then you can see that there are different regions. Right now, everyone has only one region, obviously, because it's not supported yet to have multiple. And then you can see if there are any active alerts in the different environments. You can go through that. So you have multiple Azure Stack instances. You can manage that all within the same thing. And you can see that there's, for example, an update, and then you can force the refresh for the update or restart the update process. You can manage that directly within SCOM. And then you have other tools. I'm not going to go through the whole thing here. But you can also see, again, like you always have the different Azure Stacks, and then you have the regions, and then you can see what happens there, and if you have an update. And you can monitor, for example, those updates and hotfixes directly from here. And then, again, refresh that. And you have a lot of more management stuff there as well. The other thing, wouldn't it be cool to use something a little bit fresher, right? So this is the OMS integration. You also have an OMS integration. And then you also have, obviously, the same experience now in the Azure portal. So you can basically connect your Azure Stacks or multiple Azure Stacks to your OMS or Azure Log Analytics or whatever you want to, Azure Monitor Systems, whatever you want to call it, or whatever the future brand will be, how they come together. You can see that here. And then you can use Azure Monitor to send you alerts, emails, notifications, and whatnot to do that. And this is how basically it's done. So we have here the Azure Stack Health API from the Azure Stack. We have a VM called Upload to OMS. This VM basically goes and triggers everything from the Health API and then sends it up to Log Analytics, where we then can do whatever we want with it. And there are some solutions in the Log Analytics part to basically show us the dashboards or do alerts and things like that. Good. This is a solution hosted on GitHub. It's from Microsoft themselves, but they're completely open source and completely put it there. It's also the installation, and everything is documented there. They also regularly update those components. So we are almost at the end. I just want to go a little bit through, a little bit as an overview. Azure Stack really is a cloud for itself. So you can use it either in connected mode together with Azure or in a completely disconnected environment where, again, Azure is for some reason not available. You have all the, well, you have a kind of, not all, I always have to stop saying all the Azure services. You have a subset of Azure services and obviously the Azure Marketplace available, which you can leverage on-premise as well. And then it comes as an integrated system, again, as a sealed box, if you will, where the OEMs and Microsoft do the patches, and then you just play and install them. Everything is done automatically for you. So still, as an operator, you still have some stuff to do, right? You need to monitor, you need to update, you need to make sure that the backup is running, you need to take sure about security stuff in terms of you need to like security and audit logs and check that everything is okay there. And then you also have to do capacity management because at one point you will probably have so many services deployed or your end users have so many services deployed that you probably want to have need more capacity, right? So if you're interested in becoming an Azure Stack operator, there's also an exam from Microsoft out there. It's quite a hard exam, to be honest. It's like really, it covers everything. It's not just operations. It's really also about stuff like preparing Azure Stack, and it's over everything. I heard that even some people from the Microsoft product group couldn't pass it the first time. So it's quite a good exam to do so if you want to get work with Azure Stack and you want to get certified. It's a very good exam. So with that, I want to say thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. I hope this talk was good for you guys as well. And see you around and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you.